Hi there. I'm Linda. My life took a pretty unexpected turn when I married Tom. He was a great guy, a widower with a sweet little girl named Sarah. She was 7 when I came into the picture, her mom having left when she was just a toddler. I walked into their lives hoping to make things better, to bring some love and stability. But, let's just say, things didn't go as planned. The first time I met Sarah, I remember trying to break the ice. "Hey, Sarah, I've heard so much about you. I brought some cookies. Do you like chocolate chip?" I asked, holding out a plate. She just stared at the cookies, then at me, with this look of total indifference. "I guess," she finally muttered, taking one, but avoiding eye contact. Tom smiled apologetically. "She's a bit shy around new people. Give it time, Linda." I wanted to be patient, to understand what she was going through. But it wasn't long before I noticed her coldness wasn't just shyness. Things got even more complicated when our son Danny was born. Sarah's behavior took a turn for the worse. She seemed to resent him, seeing him as a threat to her relationship with her dad. One evening, I found Danny crying in his room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, concerned. "Sarah said I'm a mistake and that Daddy doesn't love me," he sobbed. My heart sank. I confronted Sarah about it. "Why would you say something like that to Danny? He's your little brother." "He's not my brother. You're not my mom," she snapped back, her eyes defiant. Tom tried to mediate things, but it was like walking on eggshells. "Sarah, Linda's just trying to be a good mom to both of you." Sarah would roll her eyes. "She's not my mom. Don't forget that." It was tough. Every attempt I made to bond with her was met with resistance or outright hostility. And it wasn't just within our 4 walls. Her grandparents, Tom's parents, were another story. I remember one Sunday dinner, Tom's mom pulled me aside. "Linda, you need to try harder with Sarah. She feels left out since Danny came along." I was frustrated. "I've been trying, but she won't let me in. It's like she's decided to hate me no matter what I do." Tom's dad chimed in. "She's just a child, Linda. You're the adult here. You should make more of an effort." It felt like a no-win situation. I was trying my best, but nothing seemed to work. Sarah had built a wall around herself, and I just couldn't find a way through. As she grew into her teens, Sarah's behavior only got more challenging. She would flout rules, talk back, and her attitude towards me became more hostile. I felt like I was failing her, failing our family. But I wasn't about to give up. I just hoped that someday, somehow, we'd find a way to come together as a real family. Sarah's teenage years were like navigating a minefield. Every conversation felt like a potential explosion. I remember one morning trying to talk to her about school. "Sarah, why weren't you in school yesterday?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She just shrugged, pouring herself a bowl of cereal. "Didn't feel like going." "But your education is important," I persisted. "You can't just skip school whenever you want." Sarah rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. "What are you gonna do, ground me? You're not my mom." I felt a flash of frustration. "I'm not trying to replace your mom, Sarah. I just care about you." She scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yeah, right. You just want to make sure your perfect little family looks good." I was at a loss. How do you reach someone who's determined to keep you out? Tom, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap between us. One evening, he sat down with Sarah, trying to have a heart-to-heart. "Sarah, Linda's just trying to help," he said gently. "She cares about you." Sarah's response was cold and bitter. "She's not my mom, Dad. Stop trying to make her into something she's not." Tom looked defeated, his usual optimism faltering. "I know she's not your mom, but she's part of our family now. We need to try to get along." Sarah just got up and left the room, her silence speaking volumes. Tom's parents were another hurdle. They seemed to believe that I could do no right by Sarah. During a family get-together, Tom's mom pulled me aside again. "Linda, you need to be more understanding of Sarah's feelings," she said, her tone implying I was being heartless. I felt my patience wearing thin. "I've tried, but she won't let me in. It's like she hates me." Tom's mom just shook her head. "She's a sensitive girl. You need to try harder." It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter what I said, it seemed to fall on deaf ears. They had made up their minds about me, and nothing I could say or do would change that. The tension in our house was palpable. Danny, who was just a little boy, often got caught in the crossfire of Sarah's outbursts. He didn't understand why his sister was so hostile. "Why does Sarah hate us, Mom?" Danny asked one night, his little face scrunched up in confusion. I hugged him close, trying to shield him from the harsh reality. "She doesn't hate us, Danny. She's just going through a tough time." But even I wasn't convinced by my own words. Sarah's behavior was more than just teenage rebellion. It felt personal, targeted. And I couldn't help but feel responsible, like I was the catalyst for all this discord. I lay awake many nights, wondering where we had gone wrong. Was there something I could have done differently? Some way I could have reached out to her that I hadn't thought of? The questions haunted me, but answers were nowhere to be found. The day I got the call from the local police station about Sarah, my stepdaughter, felt like a punch in the gut. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone vibrated relentlessly. Excusing myself, I stepped out to answer what I assumed was another of Sarah's school-related issues. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Martinez. We've detained your stepdaughter, Sarah. She's involved in a vandalism incident." The officer's voice was firm, almost disapproving. "Vandalism? Are you sure we're talking about the same Sarah?" I stammered, my mind racing. "Yes, ma'am. Sarah Johnson, 15 years old. We need you to come and pick her up." I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. "I'll be right there," I replied, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on me as I hurried out. At the station, Sarah was slouched in a chair, her arms crossed, an air of defiance about her. She looked up as I approached, her expression one of annoyance rather than remorse. "Sarah, what in the world were you thinking?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, relax, Linda. It's not like I killed someone. We just sprayed some paint. No big deal." I was aghast. "Not a big deal?" "Sarah, this is illegal. You could be in serious trouble." Sarah snorted, standing up. "Well, I'm not. Can we go now? This place is depressing." The car ride home was a tense silence. I knew this was a conversation for both Tom and me to handle, but with him away on a business trip, I felt overwhelmed and alone. That evening, with Danny asleep, I made a call to Tom. "Tom, we have a serious problem with Sarah," I said, my voice shaky. "I know, Linda, the school has called me a few times already." "What's happened now?" Tom sounded tired. "She was detained by the police today, Tom. For vandalism," I explained, the severity of the situation hanging heavily in the air. There was a pause on the other end. "Jesus, Linda. I don't even know what to say." "We need to get her help, Tom. Therapy, counseling, something. She's out of control," I urged, feeling desperate. Tom sighed, the sound heavy and defeated. "Okay, I'll be back in 2 days. We'll sort this out." I hung up, feeling a small sense of relief, but mostly dread for what was to come. When Tom finally sat down with Sarah to discuss therapy, it was like igniting a fuse. "I'm not going to any shrink," Sarah spat, her eyes blazing. "You can't make me." Tom, trying to remain calm, countered, "It's not about making you, Sarah. It's about helping you." Sarah laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Help me? Please? You just want to dump me on someone else, because you can't deal with me." Tom's patience was wearing thin. That's not true, Sarah, and you know it. We're worried about you. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Save it, Dad. I'm not your little project. I'm out of here. And with that, she stormed out, the door slamming shut behind her. The next thing we knew, she was at her grandparents', refusing to come home or even talk to us. Tom and I were left in a state of shock and helplessness. Our family felt like it was falling apart at the seams, and at the center of it all was Sarah, a teenage girl we just couldn't seem to reach no matter how hard we tried. Things hit rock bottom the day Sarah decided she'd had enough of our rules and bolted to her grandparents. Tom and I were left in a state of shock and dismay, our family home feeling emptier than ever. Sitting in the living room, Tom kept glancing at his phone, the silence between us heavy and uncomfortable. I can't believe she'd just up and leave like that, he said, his voice a mix of frustration and disbelief. I exhaled deeply, feeling a storm of emotions brewing inside me. Tom, she's out of control. We can't just let her walk all over us. It's not right. Tom's expression was one of defeat. I know, Linda, I know. But what can we do? She's just not listening to us. Determined to get some answers, we decided to call Tom's parents. The conversation, however, quickly turned sour. Mom, this is Tom. We need to talk about Sarah, Tom began, trying to keep his voice level. His mom was quick to defend Sarah. Oh, Tom, she's just so distraught. She feels like Linda's pushing her away, trying to send her to a therapist like she's some sort of problem. I couldn't keep silent. That's not it at all. She's been getting into trouble, and we're worried about her. I snapped back, my patience wearing thin. Tom's dad jumped in, his voice bristling with irritation. Linda, you're just not understanding her. She's a delicate girl, and you've been too harsh. I felt my blood boil. Too harsh? She's been acting out, breaking laws. We're trying to do what's best for her. Well, she's staying here now. We'll handle it our way, Tom's mom retorted, her tone dismissive. Tom and I exchanged a look of frustration and helplessness. You're just going to let her skip school and hang out with God knows who? Tom challenged, his voice rising. She's just going through a phase. She'll settle down, his dad said nonchalantly, as if Sarah's behavior was no big deal. After the call, the sense of powerlessness was overwhelming. It was as if Sarah had everyone wrapped around her finger, and we were the villains for trying to impose some boundaries. In the following days, Sarah's absence cast a shadow over our home. Her room, untouched and gathering dust, was a constant reminder of the rift in our family. We sent money to Tom's parents for Sarah's expenses, but it felt like throwing money into a bottomless pit. There was no improvement, no change, just silent acceptance of her rebellion. One evening, as I tucked our son Danny into bed, his little face clouded with confusion. Mom, why did Sarah leave? Doesn't she like us anymore? I stroked his hair gently, fighting back my own emotions. Danny, it's complicated. Sarah's dealing with a lot right now. But we love her, and we're here for her whenever she's ready. Walking out of Danny's room, the weight of our family's situation hit me full force. We were a family torn apart, not by distance, but by defiance and misunderstanding. And at the heart of it all was Sarah, a girl I had hoped to embrace as my daughter, now a stranger living under another roof. For years, our house had been calm, almost too calm, without Sarah's tumultuous presence. Then, out of the blue, she showed up at our doorstep, her announcement as unexpected as her visit. Tom and I were in the kitchen when she walked in, a confident, almost brash look on her face. Hey, she said casually, as if she hadn't been away for years. Sarah, what are you doing here? Tom asked, surprise written all over his face. I've got news. I'm getting married, she declared, a smug smile playing on her lips. Tom and I exchanged glances, a mixture of shock and cautious optimism in our eyes. That's great, Sarah. Congratulations. I managed to say, though a part of me remained wary. Yeah, thanks. But here's the thing, Sarah continued, getting straight to the point. I need money for the wedding. Tom's expression hardened slightly. Money? Sarah, you haven't been home in years, and now you show up asking for money? Sarah rolled her eyes. Come on, Dad. It's not like you can't afford it. And it's not like I'm asking for much. I could feel the tension in the room escalating. Sarah, it's not just about the money. You can't just walk back into our lives and expect us to. Look, Linda, Sarah cut me off, her tone dismissive. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking Dad for a favor. The audacity of her request left me stunned. Sarah, we're a family. We make these decisions together, I said firmly. Sarah scoffed. Please, you're not my family. You're just the woman my dad married. Tom intervened, trying to keep the peace. Sarah, that's enough. Linda's right. We're a family, and we make decisions together. She looked at Tom, her expression softening slightly. Dad, please. It's my wedding. I just want it to be perfect. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. We'll think about it, Sarah. But you can't just expect us to hand over the money without some discussion. Sarah's demeanor shifted then, as if realizing her approach wasn't working. I know. I'm sorry. I really want this to be special. After she left, Tom and I had a long talk. Maybe this is a chance for us to mend things, I suggested, hopeful yet cautious. Tom nodded slowly. Maybe. But we're not just writing her a blank check. We need to be involved in the planning, make sure the money is used appropriately. I agreed. Despite Sarah's brashness, this could be our opportunity to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Maybe, just maybe, we could turn a new page with her. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Sarah's sudden return and request felt like just the calm before another storm. The days leading up to Sarah's wedding were a whirlwind of preparations. Tom and I decided to contribute generously to her wedding fund, hoping it would be a step towards mending our fractured relationship. But things took a shocking turn just a few days before the wedding. I decided to call the wedding planner to check on how the preparations were going. The conversation started off normal enough, but I could sense something was off. Hi, this is Linda Johnson, Sarah's stepmom. I'm just calling to check on the wedding preparations, I said, trying to sound casual. The wedding planner's voice was tense, hesitant. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, yes, the preparations are going well, but... But what? I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. There was a pause, and then she said, I'm not sure how to say this, but Sarah, she's made some changes to the guest list. Changes to the guest list? What kind of changes? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The planner's voice was low, almost apologetic. She's removed you, Mr. Johnson, and Danny from the list. But she's added her biological mother. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Her mother? The one who left her? Yes, and there's something else. The planner continued, her voice hesitant. The budget for the wedding, it's significantly less than the amount you gave her. I was stunned into silence. Sarah had taken the money we gave her for the wedding and spent only a fraction of it, cutting us out of her big day in the process. After hanging up, I confronted Tom with the news. His reaction was one of disbelief and then growing anger. That ungrateful little... Tom started, his fists clenched. Tom, calm down, I said, though I shared his outrage. We need to talk to her about this. When we finally got Sarah on the phone, the conversation was anything but pleasant. Sarah, why did you remove us from the wedding guest list? Tom demanded, his voice tight with anger. Sarah's response was cold and matter-of-fact. Because I don't want your wife there. This is my day, and I'll have who I want. And what about the money? I asked, struggling to keep my composure. You spent only a fraction of what we gave you. That's none of your business, she snapped back. You gave me the money, it's mine to use how I see fit. We were at a loss for words. The audacity of her actions left us both reeling. Tom, in a rare display of fury, made a decision. We're taking back our money, Sarah. We won't support this deceit, he said, his voice resolute. You can't do that, Sarah yelled, her voice shrill with panic. We can, and we will, Tom replied firmly. You've crossed a line, Sarah. The call ended with Sarah hurling insults and accusations at us before hanging up. True to his word, Tom canceled the checks, effectively putting a stop to the wedding plans. We had tried to reach out, to mend bridges, but Sarah's actions had made it clear that some rifts were too deep to heal. The fallout from the cancelled wedding hit our family like a hurricane. Sarah's response to our decision was both explosive and bitter. She showed up at our house, her face twisted with rage, hurling accusations and insults. You've ruined everything, she screamed, her eyes blazing. This was supposed to be my day, and you destroyed it. Sarah, you lied to us, Tom countered, his voice firm despite the rising tension. You deceived us about the wedding, about the money. What did you expect? I expected you to back off and let me have my day, she retorted, her fists clenched at her sides. You excluded us from your wedding, Sarah. You took the money for yourself, I added, trying to reason with her. Because it's what I deserved. After years of putting up with you, Sarah spat out, her words cutting through the air. The argument escalated until Sarah, in a final burst of anger, stormed out of the house, swearing she'd never forgive us. In the aftermath, Tom and I were left to pick up the pieces. The situation worsened when we received a call from Tom's parents. They were furious, initially blaming us for the wedding debacle, but then, their anger took a different turn. Linda, Tom, we need to tell you something, Tom's mom said over the phone, her voice shaking. After Sarah left our house, we discovered she took some of my jewelry. Valuable pieces. Tom and I were stunned into silence. She stole from you? Tom finally managed to say, disbelief coloring his tone. Yes, his dad replied, the disappointment evident in his voice. We never thought she'd do something like this to us. Are you going to report it? I asked, a mix of concern and shock in my voice. No, we can't bring ourselves to do that to our granddaughter, but we're so hurt, Tom's mom said, her voice breaking. The revelation was a bitter pill to swallow. It was one thing for Sarah to lash out at us, but to betray her own grandparents in such a way was unthinkable. Days turned into weeks, and there was no word from Sarah. Tom held on to hope that she would come to her senses and reach out, but I wasn't so sure. Tom, do you really think she'll come back after all this? I asked one evening, as we sat in our quiet living room. Tom looked out the window, a far-off look in his eyes. I don't know, Linda. I hope she does. I hope she realizes the mistake she's made and wants to make amends. I sighed, feeling a deep sense of uncertainty. I don't know if she ever will, Tom. The Sarah we knew seems to be long gone. Tom nodded, his expression somber. Maybe you're right. But she's still my daughter. I can't give up hope. As time passed, the silence from Sarah became a new norm. We heard nothing about her whereabouts or well-being. Tom's parents, too, were left in the dark, their feelings of betrayal mingling with worry for their granddaughter. In our home, life went on. Danny grew older, and we focused our energy on him, ensuring he felt loved and secure. But the shadow of Sarah's actions lingered, a reminder of the broken bridges and unhealed wounds in our family. I often found myself wondering about Sarah, about where she was and what she was doing. My feelings were a complex mix of anger, disappointment, and a faint glimmer of concern. Tom remained hopeful, but deep down, I doubted if Sarah would ever return to us, if she would ever seek the help she so desperately needed.
Just look at that, I exclaimed, staring at the electricity bill in disbelief. $327.38, nearly double what we usually pay. Outrageous. I'd always prided myself on budgeting carefully, tracking every expense down to the last penny. My passion was collecting limited edition desserts, and I indulged whenever I could. So for the bill to suddenly skyrocket made no sense. "That can't be right," Neil replied, peering over my shoulder with a frown. My supportive husband was always on my side. We haven't changed any habits recently. Well, something caused this. I grabbed my laptop to scrutinize the household usage data. No obvious spikes. Perplexed, I gazed out the window and stopped short. There, peeking out from beneath the decorative bushes separating our house from Neil's parents' new home next door, was a wire, thin and black, snaking towards their shed. Surely just a cable line? But we had underground connections. A horrible suspicion crossed my mind. No, it wasn't possible. Was it? Just last month, Neil's parents Vera and Hank had moved into the newly constructed house on the lot beside ours. Neil and I had welcomed them warmly despite Vera's tendency to overstep with unsolicited parenting advice. I'd written it off as her quirky way of showing warmth. But now... "Neil, look," I gestured out the window. As he spotted the wire, his eyebrows shot up. Without a word, we stepped outside, circling the bushes to trace the wire's path. It ran directly from our external outlet to Vera and Hank's shed. Our mouths fell open as we exchanged stunned looks. "No way," Neil uttered in disbelief. "They can't be." Anger and hurt welled up inside me. They'd seemed so friendly, so supportive. Had it all been an act? Just then, the back door of their house opened. Vera breezed out carrying gardening shears, calling over her shoulder, "Be back in a minute!" Spotting us, she changed course, bearing down with her usual overbright smile, the one I now realized never reached her eyes. "Well, hi there, neighbors," she trilled. "Taking in this beautiful sunny day?" I crossed my arms. No more playing nice while she played us for fools. "We were just investigating something strange," I said bluntly, stepping aside so she could see the wire. "Would you happen to know anything about this?" Vera's gaze bounced from me to the wire and back again. For a brief moment, her smile faltered, but then she waved a hand and laughed. "Oh, that old thing. The builders must have left it behind." Even to me, the excuse sounded feeble. She trailed off under my stern gaze. Neil stepped forward, fists clenching. "Have you been stealing our electricity, using this wire to tap into our supply?" His voice shook with anger and betrayal. Vera reeled back. "What? How dare you?" She glared venomously. "I was just trying to cut costs. Our retirement budget is stretched thin. Surely you understand." At that, the floodgates opened. I lost my composure, shouting at her audacity. Neil joined me, demanding answers about the ethics of stealing from family. She alternated between righteous indignation and half-hearted apologies. The confrontation left me reeling and even more hurt than before. That evening, after Vera had retreated in a huff, Neil held me as I cried bitter tears over the shattered remains of what I'd thought was a supportive, loving family relationship. How could they betray us like this, and what else might they be hiding? I couldn't even bear to tally up how much they could have stolen over the past month. Hundreds of dollars we'd worked hard for, callously snatched away without a thought for how it would impact us. Gazing at our electricity bill later that night, I set my jaw. The Vera and Hank I thought I knew would never do something so underhanded, which meant I'd never actually known them at all. The realization stung, but it sparked a steely determination within me. No more playing nice while they took advantage and sabotaged our carefully balanced budget. If this was their opening salvo, then the battle lines had just been drawn. I would get to the bottom of this and make them pay. I awoke the next morning still simmering from yesterday's confrontation. As I gulped my morning coffee, I kept replaying Vera's audacious lies and excuses. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. A knock at the front door made me jump. Speak of the devil. I peered out to see Vera standing there clutching a plate of cookies, an overly bright smile pasted on. Just seeing her made my blood boil even hotter. I swung open the door. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. Vera blinked, clearly taken aback by my lack of pleasantries. Good. Her smile dimmed a fraction. "Oh, Lena, about yesterday." She extended the plate. "I baked these by way of apology." I stared at the offering in disgust. Did she really think cookies would make everything better? When I made no move to take them, she pressed on earnestly. It was all just a silly misunderstanding. I never meant any harm, truly. Misunderstanding? My fists clenched by my sides. This woman's audacity knew no bounds. You mean when you deliberately tapped into our electricity supply to avoid paying your fair share? I bit out. Vera frowned, dropping the act. Oh, don't be so self-righteous. Our budget is extremely tight. We're just cutting costs where we can. By stealing from us? From your own son? How could you? We trusted you. My raised voice brought Neil from the other room. I felt him come stand supportively beside me. Vera flushed. Now see here, you two are blowing this out of proportion. Can't we talk civilly about this over some cookies? She offered the plate again with a conciliatory smile. But I'd had enough. Taking the plate from her, I upended it onto the doormat. Cookies scattered everywhere as Vera gasped. There! Take back your lies and excuses. I glared venomously. We will not be placated so easily. As I slammed the door in her astonished face, I felt a small spark of vicious satisfaction. There, let her see I wasn't messing around. Over the next few days, Vera's intrusions multiplied, stoking my simmering resentment. She popped by nearly every day with unwanted gifts and advice about everything from our spending habits to refrigerator organization. Each visit grated on me more. The final straw came when I spotted her letting herself in our back gate one morning. Marching outside, I confronted her sneaking around near our fuse box. She claimed she was just checking the wiring, but I knew she was scoping out ways to restore her illegal supply. Enraged, I changed the locks and gate code. When Neil suggested leaving a key with his parents just in case of emergency, I shot that down fast. Give them an inch, they'd take 10 miles. Clearly, they refused to respect boundaries. Well, if politeness wouldn't get through, then it was time to play hardball. Over dinner with Neil that night, I revealed my plan. We need evidence before going to the electric company or police. I'm going to set up a surveillance camera covering that fuse box. That should capture any further attempts. Neil frowned nervously. Isn't that a bit aggressive? They're still my parents. I fixed him with an adamant stare. They committed theft without batting an eye. I warned you they'd take advantage of any wiggle room we give them. It's time to take a stand. Neil's shoulders slumped. You're right, I just wish it hadn't come to this. I knew he was still clinging to hope of reconciling with them. But sentimentality would get us nowhere against such conniving adversaries. The very next morning, the camera captured Vera skulking by our fuse box, clearly probing for a way to reconnect. Gotcha! I added the video to the growing evidence file. When she caught me installing a motion-activated floodlight days later, Vera went pale. I maintained steely eye contact until she hurried away without a word. Good. Let her sweat a little. She was quickly learning her tricks wouldn't work on me. Soon we'd have enough documentation to bring down the full consequences on her deceitful head. She'd rue the day she ever thought she could walk all over me without retaliation. By the time I was through, karma would bite back hard for her lies and manipulation. This was only the opening salvo. The real fireworks were still to come. Over the next week, I became obsessed with monitoring Vera's activity and tracking our electricity usage. I knew something didn't add up there and was determined to get to the bottom of things. Sure enough, one morning the motion detector notifications showed Vera skulking around our yard in the early hours. The floodlight switched on, illuminating her heading towards the back gate with wire cutters in hand. Smirking, I swung open the back door. Forget the locks, Vera? Or were you hoping to override my security system? She jolted, hiding the cutters behind her back. Lena, I was just, checking the wiring connections back here. I stepped forward, glaring daggers. Save it. I've got you on camera trying to break in and poach our supply again. Vera straightened defiantly. You can't prove anything. I'm well within my rights to check wiring on my property. The only thing you have a right to do is stay the hell away from our house, I shouted. Give me those. I lunged for the cutters, but she dodged me. We struggled briefly before she wrenched away, lips curled in a sneer. Have it your way, then. But this isn't over. I promise you that. She turned and stormed off. Seething, I relocked the gate and rearmed the security system. How far would that deranged woman go? Over the next few days, Vera kept her distance. But my anger simmered, erupting one evening when our latest electricity bill arrived. I tore open the envelope and scanned the total, $412.60. What? I exploded, making Neil jump. Even after locking them out, it keeps getting higher. Neil's forehead creased with worry. Are you sure the motion lights aren't causing it? I shook my head firmly. I've accounted for every variable. Something fishy is still going on here. Suddenly the doorbell rang. We exchanged wary glances before Neil opened it to reveal Hank standing there, shuffling nervously. We need to talk, he mumbled, not quite meeting our eyes. It's about the wiring issues. I crossed my arms, steeling myself. Go on then. Hank cleared his throat. Vera wants to bury the hatchet, and we'd like a key made just in case you two are ever unavailable and an emergency repair is needed. My temper flared again. Give them access after everything? Not a chance. I jabbed a finger at Hank's chest. You mean give you free rein to keep tapping our power? Hank backed away, protesting. Neil quickly intervened before things escalated further. After Hank retreated in a huff, Neil gave me a serious look. We can't keep fighting them like this. What if we sit down civilly and try to sort this out? I bit my lip, considering. As much as I hated to admit it, maybe we did need an open conversation before things spiraled irrevocably out of control. So a few days later, Vera and Hank sat stiffly on our couch while Neil mediated. I stated my case bluntly. The unchecked electricity drainage had to stop, or we'd take legal action. Vera alternated between superficial apologies and rambling excuses, while Hank stared at the floor. Eventually, Neil negotiated a tenuous truce. We'd refrain from formal complaints if the electrical issues ceased immediately. After they left, Neil gave me a pleading look. Let's give them one last chance before escalating this further. Though it grated on me, I reluctantly agreed. One final opportunity to make things right, before my vengeance hammer fell with full righteous fury. In the following days, I still patrolled for suspicious activity, but when our next bill showed only a marginal increase, I allowed my guard to lower slightly. Maybe they were actually holding up their end for once. Either way, the surveillance would continue. I wouldn't be fooled again by their facade. Soon I'd know if this truce was genuine, or merely the quiet before their next brazen attack. I awoke one morning to find Neil already up, pacing worriedly. Wordlessly, he handed me the latest electricity bill, $492.79. I saw red. It was even higher than the first shocking amount. Despite all my precautions, I slammed the paper down. I knew it. They blatantly lied about stopping their deceitful schemes. It's time to bring down the hammer on them. Neil wrung his hands anxiously. Shouldn't we confirm it's actually them first? Oh, it's them all right, I fumed. Now we're getting the electric company involved to trace this. Whipping out my phone, I called to demand an urgent investigation. The following afternoon, I escorted the technician towards our fuse box, scanning for any sight of Vera and Hank. If they caught wind of this inspection, there'd be hell to pay. Luckily, their house appeared silent. The tech removed the box cover, examining the interior wiring with a practiced eye. As he shifted to inspect the ground wire connections, he paused. Well, that shouldn't be there. I hurried over to see him tugging on a cable that had been very deliberately wired into our supply line. My fists clenched with rage. Gotcha! I knew they couldn't resist resuming their illegal connections. Their audacity knew no bounds. The technician shook his head. You've got a tap wire spliced directly into your power. Draining it right off, too. He traced the cable behind our bushes. Looks like that house next door. I threw my hands up furiously. I knew it. Those lying snakes swore they'd stop stealing from us. Wait until I expose their thievery to the whole neighborhood. I whirled to storm next door and confront them, but Neil grabbed my shoulders gently. We have solid evidence now. Let's make a plan first before charging over there. I took a deep breath, wrestling my temper back under control. He was right. As satisfying as a verbal lashing would feel, it would likely only spawn more lies and denial. Better to retain the element of surprise for now. The technician cleared his throat awkwardly. If you'd like to file charges, I can provide documentation on the unauthorized wiring setup here. I gave a sharp nod. Yes, we absolutely want to pursue this legally. Justice would be served soon enough. That night after dinner, Neil and I strategized our next moves. In addition to pressing charges, I suggested blasting their thievery across neighborhood Facebook groups. Once everyone knows what duplicitous fraudsters they are, they'll be social outcasts. Avoiding jail is the least of what they deserve. I slammed my hand on the table for emphasis. Neil bit his lip nervously. I agree they need to face consequences, but public shaming seems extreme. I leaned forward adamantly. After all the warnings and second chances, I will flaunt their shame so widely they'll never show their faces around here again. Neil still looked hesitant about my scorched earth approach, but the die was cast. After tomorrow's confrontation, one way or another, Vera and Hank would regret the day they ever targeted me as an easy victim for their deception. The next evening, I turned off all our outdoor lights and ensured the motion detectors were disabled. Under cover of darkness, the technician arrived to sever and remove Vera and Hank's parasitic connection. Phase 1 of retaliation was complete. At sunrise, after double-checking the cables had been separated, I dialed the police dispatcher with Neil beside me. My hand tremored slightly as I reported the extensive wire fraud next door. But my voice remained steady, fueled by white-hot indignation. I wanted to witness Vera and Hank's reactions firsthand when the police showed up to investigate. But Neil convinced me to lay low to avoid prematurely tipping them off. So we watched discreetly through the window as first one, then 2 squad cars rolled up outside their house. As the officers knocked and presented a search warrant, I hugged myself tight, almost dizzy with vicious satisfaction. Got them. After all the lies and manipulation, their web of deception was unraveling before my eyes. Soon they'd be facing criminal charges, and once word spread about their shady exploits grifting naive neighbors, their remaining reputation would be left in tatters too. I finally exhaled, feeling the knots of tension start to loosen within me. The confrontation would come soon enough, but for now I'd scored a decisive victory against their underhanded scheming. Watching the police continue scouring Vera and Hank's home for illicit connections, I allowed myself a small smug smile. Justice was finally at hand. In the aftermath of the police visit, an uneasy quiet descended on our normally peaceful neighborhood. I kept vigilant watch out the window as whispers spread about Vera and Hank's shady wiring scam. When curious neighbors knocked to probe us for details, I remained tight-lipped. Let the authorities handle things from here. Though it took immense self-restraint not to blast Vera's misdeeds from the rooftops myself, I waited to see how the investigation unfolded. Sure enough, a few days later, Neil spotted a certified letter in their mailbox, addressed from the county clerk's office. Subpoena for evidence, no doubt. The wheels of justice were turning. My smug satisfaction only grew when I peered out the window later to see Vera emerging red-eyed and distressed from a shouting match with Hank. She must be waking up to the severity of the charges they faced with their little larceny scheme unraveling fast. As I watched her hurry tearfully back inside, I couldn't suppress a vicious smirk. Where were her snide excuses and haughty denials now that hard proof had been found? Serves her right. Maybe the threat of jail time would make her reflect on toying with decent, law-abiding folks. The sight stirred conflicting emotions in Neil, though. That night over dinner, his brow remained deeply furrowed. Do you think I should try talking to them?" he suggested tentatively. "Plead for leniency with the DA before an indictment comes down?" My hand clenched furiously around my fork. Lenient? Is that what their deceit and manipulation warranted? When they'd shown no mercy towards our hard-earned money or trust in family bonds? Taking a deep breath to rein in my outrage, I fixed Neil with a stern look. "You can't protect them from what's coming. Don't let misplaced guilt sway you from the facts." He looked away, jaw tight. I knew seeing his parents suffer pained him on some level. But the time for sympathy was long past. The next morning brought a new development, a large for sale sign staked outside Vera and Hank's house. Peering out as a startled neighbor walked by, I understood immediately. They were trying to liquidate fast and hightail it out of here before the hammer fell. Well, not if I had anything to say about it. Storming outside in my bathrobe, I waved wildly to stop the passing couple gawking at the sign. Time for some strategic gossip-mongering. "A shame about those electrical thieves leaving already, isn't it?" I commented conversationally. I would have loved to see them in handcuffs getting dragged off to prison myself. The wife's eyes boggled. Mission accomplished. That juicy tidbit would spread quickly now. Let's see anyone make offers once word got out They were flight risks awaiting criminal charges. I strode back inside with grim satisfaction, already formulating my next moves. Vera and Hank had avoided me long enough. It was time we finally talked openly. Soon Neil and I stood firmly at their front door as I rapped sharply. When Vera answered, surprise flashed across her face before she schooled her features carefully neutral. "Lena, Neil, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Her polite tone held an unmistakable note of wariness. I folded my arms severely. "You know exactly why. We're here to talk things over." Vera eyed me for a long, silent moment before reluctantly backing up in wordless invitation. As we stepped inside and sat on their couch, I inspected Vera closely. She seemed diminished somehow, worn and haggard in a way that had nothing to do with physical age. The gnawing anxiety was clear in her dull eyes and tense posture. Good, let her squirm. I had zero intentions of showing mercy. Not until she fully acknowledged her lies and made proper amends. Settling back with arms still crossed, I pinned her with an icy stare. "Well then, let's chat frankly now about recent events, shall we?" Her hands twisted together nervously. "Yes, Vera. Face the music at last." In the days following Vera and Hank's dramatic arrest, the neighborhood gossip mill churned faster than ever before. Supportive friends stopped by, eager for updates while casting disdain on that awful thieving couple. I remained discreet with details, but made sure everyone knew they'd admitted guilt to us directly. Let Vera's illusions of sympathy for her plight be crushed. Neil busied himself advocating for leniency against my advice. "She still deserves imprisonment for the betrayal of family," I argued hotly. Neil just sighed. "Harsh sentences won't undo the damage, though." Though it irked me letting Vera off lightly, Neil's pure heart wouldn't wish crushing punishment on anyone. A week later, Neil got an update call from Vera's lawyer. In exchange for testimony on other neighborhood scam incidents, she'd gotten off with probation and heavy court fees. I scowled angrily at the news. A light slap on the wrist. Where was the justice for nearly $1,000 stolen from us over numerous months? Storming outside that afternoon to retrieve the mail, I paused, seeing Hank shuffling forlornly around their for sale sign. His worn complexion and disheveled appearance testified to many sleepless, stressful nights since their crimes had come to light. Good. Let the weight of consequences torment them a while longer. Skirting widely around Hank, I went back inside, feeling sour. Neil tried reassuring me again. "She's banned from our property at least, plus the public shaming. Isn't that enough?" My temper flared. "Hardly. That woman slithered out of any real punishment for her misdeeds. Well, we shall see." I wasn't done with Vera yet. Time for the next phase. Ensuing, she fully paid her karmic debts. Using contacts I had in the county clerk's office, I quietly pursued getting the case evidence released publicly. And I began judiciously leaking additional gossip about Vera's long history of shady dealings. Let the full spotlight expose her deceit for all to revile. Soon enough, muckraking local reporters came sniffing at my prompts. I watched with smug satisfaction as the first scathing exposés skewering shameless schemester Vera hit the presses. As if on cue, my phone pinged with a neighborhood watch alert. Vera had been spotted yelling tearfully at a reporter to leave her alone. Music to my ears. Clearly, the non-stop public harassment was taking its toll. Over dinner, I showed Neil the alert triumphantly. Now she's getting a taste of consequences beyond the courthouse. But instead of matching my fierce grin, Neil paled. "This seems less like justice and more just cruelty now," he said quietly. "She's clearly paid for her crimes already." I smacked my hand down furiously. "How can you say that? Mere fines and hand slaps while she sobs about harassment. I won't rest until she fully understands the pain her deceit caused." Neil just gazed at me sorrowfully. Stung, I turned away. Why couldn't he see I was protecting us from further exploitation? The next morning brought a new bombshell. I spotted a local real estate item announcing Vera and Hank's house had sold for a fraction of its value after sitting unpurchased for weeks. Ha! Undoubtedly the non-stop media spotlight had scared away any serious buyers. Sweet justice. Perhaps the financial blow would finally dent Vera's defiant spirit. Sure enough, later that day a moving truck rolled up outside their house. I watched with vicious satisfaction as a weary, broken-looking Vera supervised movers hauling shabby boxes out to the truck unassisted by any friends or family. In her expression of utter defeat, I recognized the bitter taste of karmic retribution at last. She was getting every bit of what she deserved. Soon I'd be fully rid of her deceptions and delusions of grandeur for good. Let her start over penniless and friendless elsewhere. As the moving truck finally pulled away, exhaust fumes momentarily obscuring Vera's face, I lifted my chin in cold triumph. I'd won. In the weeks after Vera and Hank's ignominious exit, the neighborhood gossip mill continued churning. But with the primary culprits gone, intrigue gradually faded. Soon talk turned to more mundane matters, and benign normalcy returned to our quiet corner of suburbia. Neil and I gradually adjusted back to our familiar routines free of toxic drama. With our backyard now a serene vista instead of an anxiety minefield, my guarded hypervigilance eased. I took smug satisfaction seeing new friendly neighbors move into Vera's former house, restoring community spirit. One afternoon while gardening, I made casual small talk with them about selecting new fence plants without the old electrical complications. Goodness, we'd heard rumors the previous residents were problematic, the wife said, eyes round. Something about stealing utilities? How dreadful for you! I smiled blandly, holding off from fueling rumors. Let the Vera debacle fade fully into the past now. That night I sorted through old papers and spotted evidence records from the wire fraud case. I paused, Vera and Hank's embittered faces flashing through my mind. Then I firmly shoved the papers in the shredder. Piece by piece I disposed of the last lingering vestiges of their existence cluttering my orderly world. Soon I could close the book on that chapter for good. With them off, reinventing themselves elsewhere, I finally had closure. Meanwhile, Neil seemed to relax as well, now that his parents were safely out of legal jeopardy, and time had passed since the arrest scandals. We settled fully back into familiar routines. After returning from his teaching job one day, Neil wrapped me in a grateful hug. I'm glad we can just focus on us again. No more disputes interfering with enjoying each moment together. I squeezed him back happily, the past year's stresses dissipating further. Harmony was worth far more than any revenge. To celebrate leaving toxicity behind, I indulged in purchasing a long-coveted, rare French dessert I'd bookmarked, symbolic of restoring sweetness to life. The $200 price barely dented savings bolstered from an electricity bill back to normal. One morning, soon after, I walked outside to get the mail and paused, seeing an unfamiliar envelope addressed simply, "To my daughter-in-law." I froze. Vera? How dare she contact me after everything? Hands shaking slightly, I tore the envelope open. Inside, I found a brief note in shaky handwriting. Lena, I owe you the deepest apology for betrayal that cannot be forgiven. I pray you've found peace. I will not contact or return again. Instead of vindication, a surprising emotion lanced through me. Shame. Because this single conciliatory letter conveyed more authentic remorse than all Vera's tearful drama ever had. I tried justifying my retaliation campaign. She'd brought it on herself. But remembering Vera's broken expression as she drove away in defeat, had getting even truly brought me satisfaction either? Had I become the very monster I hated in her? At that moment, Neil walked up behind me. What's wrong, honey? Wordlessly, I handed him the letter. As he read, eyebrows furrowing worriedly, my high moral ground suddenly felt much less secure. Yes, Vera and Hank had acted despicably out of misguided self-interest. But did everyone, even the lowest scoundrel, not deserve redemption someday? Perhaps in banishing Vera so ruthlessly, I had strayed farthest of all from basic human decency. What truly separated my hardball tactics from her manipulations in the end? Weeks later, the matter still pestered my conscience. To clear the air fully, I knew hard conversations remained. One night at dinner, I broke the heavy silence. Do you ever regret how forcefully we handled things with your parents? Neil blinked, hesitating thoughtfully. I just wish communications had stayed more civil on all sides. My face flushed hot with remorse. I shouldn't have kept escalating vengefully. Can you forgive me? I held my breath. Neil smiled gently, taking my hands in his. Of course. Let's leave recrimination buried in the past now where it belongs. The relief of reconciliation washed over me. I still had much self-reflection yet ahead on temperance and compassion. But together, Neil and I would find our way towards better understandings. As we embraced lovingly, I let go fully of the last bitter remnants of score-settling resentment I'd clung to so fiercely. What mattered most was choosing each day to see the best, not the worst, in those around me, including myself.